Welcome into MMA weigh-in for UFC 231 from Toronto, Canada, Saturday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, pay-per-view main card start. We got our UFC expert, knows the betting markets as good as anyone, Matt Holt. Matt, welcome in. How are you?
Hey, Drew. It's been a long time, man. Great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you too, man. We were just talking off camera. Both really excited about this card Saturday night. As the college football season's ending, we're getting UFC on a Saturday night after Army-Navy. Should be a fun card here. We're going to break down all of the main card and then also get a couple prelim looks from you as well. But let's not bury the lead, Matt. Let's get right into it, what the people are looking for. We got the featherweight title fight Saturday night from Toronto, Canada. Max Holloway, Brian Ortega. Matt, this is a pretty even matchup according to the betting markets. Depending where you're shopping, looks like a pick'em. Minus 110 on each side using SBR odds right now at a lot of sports books. How would you look to bet Holloway Ortega?
Look, and this was one of the most anticipated fights of the year. Unfortunately, it was canceled the last time these two were supposed to fight, so it lost a little bit of steam. But you're right, you couldn't have pegged it anymore. Not only do the betting markets say these two are dead even, but the stats and the numbers and the tail of the tape says they're dead even. Both guys, 27 years old, right in their prime. Brian Ortega, 14-0. Max Holloway, 12 straight wins. So here you have two guys, mid-20s, right in the middle of their prime, fighting it out for the featherweight title. Undisputed champion and number one contender here. Really exciting fight. The biggest question mark for me in this fight is the health of Max Holloway. Look, coming into 2018, you could have made a case that Max Holloway was the hottest fighter on the planet. Suddenly, though, Max Holloway, 3 fights in 2018 supposed to happen, 3 pullouts. Pulled out against Khabib, pulled out against Brian Ortega, and pulled out against Frankie Edgar earlier in the year. So 3 fights had to be canceled. And what's scary here, and what myself and a lot of people have noticed, and even Max Holloway admits it himself, is he is a huge 145-pounder. And I wonder, even though he's only 27 years old, have all these years of super strenuous weight cuts started to take a toll? And the answer can't be no to that question, because just in the last fight scheduled in preparation for this fight, we saw him have unbelievably negative concussion-like syndromes due to the extreme weight cut. In fact, the fight that was scheduled before that, when he was going to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, the same thing, the doctors actually in New York said, you can't fight. This is too much of an extreme weight cut. And, there's been a lot of debate and controversy in the MMA world about how much weight can a fighter healthy cut in a 24 or 48-hour period. Is cutting 15, 20, 30 pounds in a week a healthy experience? And what are the dangers? And we're starting to see some of those signs of Max Holloway. If you believe that Max Holloway is healthy, then I think Max Holloway is a very small underdog, is probably the way to go in this fight. Because the one thing we have seen about Brian Ortega, despite the fact that he has 6 straight wins by finish, outside of that Frankie Edgar and Cub Swanson fights in his last 2, especially the Frankie Edgar fight where he finished him early with the standing elbow, the Renato Carnera fight, the Clay Guida fight, the Diego Brando fight, he was losing all those fights. Clay Guida was dominating Brian Ortega on the scorecards, and Ortega was able to rally and get a 3rd-round stoppage. The big knock on Brian Ortega has been sometimes he's not the most active fighter. He stands around, he poses a little bit too much. He doesn't have enough volume early on in fights. That being said, he finds a way to win all these fights. Max Holloway, just the opposite on the other end. He is all volume, all in your face, nonstop kickboxing all the time. And the speed in which he throws those kick punch combinations is unbelievable. My fear is, what is the health status of Max Holloway, who needs to be fighting at 155 pounds and is still fighting at 145 pounds? With that being said, we have to assume the guy's healthy. We have to assume he's had a better weight cut because he says so. He looked pretty good this week in the interviews. We didn't see any of the same signals we saw in the last fight. So let's make the assumption he's healthy. These are 2 guys who both get a lot of stoppages, actually, But I actually think this one's probably going to go a little longer than most people expect. And I like the over 3.5 rounds, around a pick'em price, maybe minus 120, maybe minus 125. I laid 20 personally, but close to that pick'em range, over 3.5 rounds. So I actually took this fight over. And once that big Ortega money came in, and as everyone started talking about concussion-like syndromes and what happened to Max again, I went ahead and took the Hawaii champion at plus 105. So it's a difficult fight to wager on because you have some unknowns. What is the health status of Max Holloway? And let's face it, probably nobody besides Max Holloway and his team 100% knows what the health status is there. Let's assume he's healthy. I'm going with the champ. I'm going with the over. I like him to win a unanimous, hard-fought decision in this fight. So I'm taking Max Holloway plus 05 and over 3.5 rounds, minus 120.
Okay, Matt. So you like 1 unit on the over and 1 unit on Max Holloway?
Yes.
Okay, and just a follow-up question on this fight, Matt. You bring up the fact of cutting weight. I've heard a couple different ways to kind of improve that, as far as maybe checking a weight cut, 3 weeks out, a month out, and making sure guys are on route to kind of making that weight. That might work. But as far as betting this fight, you brought up the concussion-like symptoms. That's the one I heard. I haven't heard it as much as cutting the weight in that being correlated, but bringing the concussions into
100% correlated.
Okay, it is 100% correlated, but bringing the concussion into this handicap, you've been around MMA and UFC betting a lot. How much does that kind of carry over? Is it 100% carryover if you've had concussions in the past, it goes to your next upcoming match, or is it kind of 50-50 that it can still cause problems?
No, so here's how it's correlated. So when your body gets extremely dehydrated, and let's face it, these weight cuts are all about dehydration. Most of the weight that these guys are dropping on fight week is water weight. They're already in good shape by the time they get to these arenas and get to these cities for fight week. The weight that they drop that week is water weight. So basically you're dehydrating your body to an extreme basis. Anytime your body is extremely dehydrated, then it causes issues with blood going to your brain and other things, and thus you become more likely and more susceptible to concussion-like syndromes or symptoms. So that's why the two are correlated. But
okay,
as we see in the NFL and other sports, while once you've had concussions, it's certainly you become more susceptible to having a concussion easier. But once you get over those concussion symptoms, it doesn't necessarily have a lingering effect in that particular event or situation. It just means that you're probably more susceptible to having them again in the future. In this situation, again, we have to assume that Max Holloway, I know he did some things different, to your point, this training camp to make sure the weight cut wasn't an issue after two really bad weight cuts, which got fights to be scrapped. So let's assume, like Khabib Nurmagomedov did, that he went out and got a different dietitian, a different nutritionist, and did a different weight cutting system, and that he's 100% healthy, because we can't assume anything else here. If we try to wager on this fight with any other assumption than both fighters are 100% healthy, then we're making really bad assumptions. But if we wager on the fight, assuming both fighters are 100% healthy, then the numbers right now favor the champion, Max Holloway.
Thanks for breaking that down, Matt. And 1 unit on the over, 1 unit on Max Holloway there, pick 'em price, if you can find it. We got 2 title fights on here. The co-main event up next, Matt. We got the women's flyweight title fight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Valentina Shevchenko. Minus 350. Heavy favorite here, Valentina is. That's at Intertops. You can also find it minus 320 at Bet Online. How would you look to bet the women's flyweight title fight, Matt?
Look, again, we talk about an evenly matched fight here. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, former strawweight champion of the world, 31 years old, 15-2. Valentina Shevchenko, 30 years old, 15-3. On paper, these two, again, another great matchmaking situation here. We look at Joanna Jędrzejczyk, long-time strawweight champion of the world for the UFC at 115 pounds. The one things that stood out to me in this fight, 10 decision wins out of 15 wins for Joanna Jędrzejczyk. On the other side of it, Valentina Shevchenko beat Holly Holm, has some impressive wins, beat Juliana Pena. Who were the fighters that she lost to? She lost to Amanda Nunes twice. And basically on the other side, Joanna Jędrzejczyk lost to Rose Namajunas twice. So they both lost to the current champions in those divisions twice. Valentina Shevchenko making the big drop in weight here. Joanna Jędrzejczyk making the big climb in weight. Everybody assumes that automatically Joanna Jędrzejczyk can't win this fight. But in reality, let's face it, the total on this fight tells us that this fight is most likely to go the distance. So let's assume that total, which I think is minus 300 plus, it's at least minus 300 on the over on this fight everywhere. So we're supposed to go to the distance. So what's going to happen in this fight in between that that's going to decide the fight? Well, we know Valentina's a great kickboxer, and I take Valentina's fight against Holly Holm as an example of why I might make a small half-unit play on Joanna Jędrzejczyk here. Valentina Shevchenko, this is for the 125-pound belt, beat Holly Holm, who has fought at 145 pounds 3 different times, and she beat her by moving, counter-striking, and a lot of volume, and at the end of the day, outworking her in that fight. Nobody is a better volume striker in women's MMA than Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So in a fight where we're talking about we're expected to go to the distance, neither one of these women are really ground orientated. So we expect this to be a stand-up matchup. We expect it to go to the distance. There's no reason why Joanna Jędrzejczyk can't use that superior kickboxing and volume striking to steal a couple of rounds. I think this fight's more of like in the minus 180, minus 190 range for Valentina Shevchenko. For that reason, I threw a half unit at plus 280 on the former strawweight champion in the world, Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
I love it, Matt. The underdog bettors out there getting a smile on their face. Plus 280 half unit on Joanna as the heavy underdog in the flyweight title fight for the women's division. Love that pick. We got a welterweight bout here, middle of the card. Alex Oliveira versus Gunnar Nelson. Oliveira commanding plus 110, plus 100, depending where you're shopping, where Nelson's about a minus 140 to minus 120 favorite here. So a slight favorite for Nelson. To tell you the truth, Matt, I was kind of looking at Oliveira. I'm waiting for your analysis each UFC card, which we do this, guys, every UFC numbered event. We're doing MMA weigh-ins, so you can make sure to join us on the Thursday or Friday before these fights. But I'm looking towards Oliveira, Matt. How are you looking to bet this one?
I actually like Alex Oliveira quite a bit in this fight, and I played him as well. And one of the things I looked at, and look, Alex Oliveira's had some struggles in the past. He lost to Cowboy Cerrone. He lost to Yancy Medeiros a couple of fights ago by knockout. But how has he done against guys who are submission / ground-orientated guys? Ryan LaFleur, Will Brooks, Tim Means, Carlos Condit are all either wrestlers or jiu-jitsu submission artists, and he beat all 4 of them. So this is a guy who hasn't had any trouble with ground-orientated fighters. He's struggled with big punchers who can then either turn that into a submission or knock him out. Yancy Medeiros, pure power. He knocked Oliveira out. Cowboy Cerrone hurt Oliveira on the feet before wrapping up a submission. But in this case, Gunnar Nelson is by far the inferior striker in this fight. Cowboy Oliveira, 12 of his 19 wins by knockout, 4 submissions, only gone to the distance 3 times. This fight's likely to go under. They're telling you this is a welterweight fight with a total of 1.5 at basically a pick'em, maybe 1.5 over minus 20. So this fight isn't supposed to go very long. So if the fight isn't supposed to go more than a round and a half and somebody's supposed to get finished, well, who's going to get finished? Alex Oliveira has unbelievable punching power shown by the 12 knockouts out of 19 wins. And he's pretty slick on the ground, as we saw in his debut against Gilbert Burns, one of the better Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighters in the world. On the other side, Gunnar Nelson is a one-dimensional fighter. 16 wins, 3 knockouts, 12 wins by submission. If he can't get you to the ground and get you in a submission, he's in a lot of trouble. And we've seen him in losses to Santiago Ponzinibbio, Rick Story, not be able to handle big, strong, punching guys. I think in this situation, people get excited about Gunnar Nelson and some of his wins in the past, but those wins over Alan Jobain and Brandon Thatch are starting to look a lot less impressive now than they actually did at the time. Brandon Thatch isn't even in the UFC anymore. Alan Jobain, multiple losses since. Those wins, which looked pretty impressive at the time, have lost a lot of luster since. And also, we have the ring rust in our favor here, as Gunnar Nelson hasn't fought since July 2017 when he got manhandled by Santiago Ponzinibbio. So a 15-month layoff to overcome for Gunnar Nelson as well. Everything points to Cowboy Oliveira in this fight. I thought I was going to have to lay 150, 160, 170. Nope, bargain basement prices, minus 120 on Cowboy Oliveira, and I'm taking that holiday sale.
All right, I like it, man. Yeah, 15-month ring rust there for Nelson. Not liking that, so liking Oliveira. And you can get him at a plus price right now, or about minus 110, like you said, Matt. We got a featherweight bout, Kyle Blachowicz versus Akeem Dawodu. That was producer Raphael helping us out with his last name. Plus 150 for Kyle, minus 170 for Hakeem. Matt, how would you look to bet the featherweight bout in this?
I'm a little bit hesitant to play this fight. I think Hakeem's still a little bit young. I'm not 100% sure that I want to lay the number with him. I think there's two ways to play this. Either go ahead and lay the number with Hakeem Dawodu in this fight, or maybe even take a shot at the number. 6 of Dawodu's wins, 6 of his 8 wins come by knockout. This is a power punching kickboxer from Canada, and he's likely to be able to put Bochniak away in this. And the over on this fight is minus 220. So at 2-1 odds that this thing doesn't go over, I think there might be some value there. I didn't play this one myself, but I will say this when breaking down this fight didn't make the main card because it's a great matchup of 2 young prospects. The UFC has started to do this more and more and more on pay-per-view cards, is they have one super prospect coming up who they want to highlight, and they try to find a favorable matchup for that individual that's not too much of a mismatch where he can look good on a pay-per-view card so they can market him for his next fight. I think that's the case here. I'm not too excited about the underdog here. If I'm playing, I'm laying, or I'm taking the total at plus money on the under.
Okay, and you bring up the fact that he's from Canada, this being in Toronto, that might be added juice to what you were saying, right, Matt?
He's exciting there. He's one of the hot young prospects coming out of Canada, and he's a kickboxer and a striker. So what's going to happen in this fight is look, I think I just talked myself on. I'm getting on Akeem for a unit here. I'm going to go ahead and lay the wood. And what's going to happen with strikers like that is they get the crowd into it. We know in MMA, not all the fans in attendance understand the nuances of the ground game in MMA fighting. But this is going to be a stand-up fight. Every time Akeem throws one of those big kicks, one of those spin moves he does, the crowd is going to react in a big-time way. And these judges are only human. And let's face it, sometimes that crowd reaction can influence them a little bit. And more over the last few years, we've seen very hometown-orientated decisions coming into international fights. Man, there's a lot of reasons to like the chalk here, and maybe the price under $2 might be worth a play.
All right, Matty, let's move to the light heavyweight bout. We got Jimmy Manua versus Thiago Santos. Santos minus 200 favorite, can get Jimmy at plus 175 at most shops right now. Matt, how would you look to bet the light heavyweight bout?
Easy for me, 1 unit on Jimmy Manua without question here. Look, this is a guy, Jimmy Manua, who was 1 fight away from a title shot at light heavyweight until he got knocked out by Volkan Oezdemir. He came back in March, didn't seem all that motivated, took a fight against Jan Blachowicz on the Fabricio Verdum Volkov undercard, and ended up losing a boring decision. But Jan Blachowicz is a ground fighter who wants to take all these fights to the ground. He was able to ground Jimmy Manua. 15 of Manua's 17 wins by knockout. And again, we're talking about knockouts of Ovin St. Preux, Corey Anderson. He actually beat Jan Blachowicz some years ago in 2015. This was the revenge fight for Blachowicz, who actually stuck to his ground in game and won. But when you look at his losses, Volkan Oezdemir ranked in the top 5, Anthony Rumble Johnson, 2-time title challenger at light heavyweight, Alexander Gustafsson, fought for the light heavyweight twice against both John Jones and Daniel Cormier. So Manua's losses are all legit. On the other side of this, look, I love Thiago Santos. He's fun to watch. Almost all of his fights end in knockout. 13 of his 19 wins by knockout. And usually when he loses, he gets finished. The last 3 times he lost, David Branch, Eric Spicely, Gegard Mousasi, they were all finishes. So normally his fights are exciting, but he hasn't beaten anybody to the extent of the fighter who's going to be in there with him now. And this is a guy who just last year was fighting at middleweight his whole career, Thiago Santos. And he has wins over Anthony Lionheart-Smith, Jack Hermanson, Gerard Mearshart, Jack Marshman, and old washed-up Nate Marquardt. He has never fought a ranked light heavyweight in his life except one, David Branch, the one ranked light heavyweight that Thiago Santos fought. David Branch knocked Thiago Santos out in the first round. For that reason, I'm taking the underdog, Jimmy Manua here, who due to his inactivity lately is being massively undervalued in this spot. And I think he's going to get an early finish in this fight. And I love the plus 170 on Manua.
All right, like in the underdog there, like in a lot of underdogs on the main card there, Matt. I want to give a shout out to the chat box, George Young. Yeah, we will go over the best bets at the end here. JC, what's up? Brian Ball, let us know what you guys want to hear. We got a couple minutes left. Matt, did you want to throw out any other bets on the prelims for UFC 231?
I played 2 prelims on this card. The first one, Gilbert Burns over Aubin. Olivier Mercier, and the reasoning there was simple for me. Olivier Mercier only has 1 knockout. Almost all of his wins come by submission or decision. So this fight is very, very likely to go to the ground. So you have 2 ground specialists here. They might be equal in terms of age, record, current standing in the UFC, but Gilbert Burns is one of the greatest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in the UFC right now. And in a fight where it's almost guaranteed to go to the ground, I'm taking the better submission guy, and I'm getting him at a very small underdog price, around even money. The fight's basically a pick'em. I think there's a lot of value there. And the other fight I'm interested in is Eric Anders against Elias Theodoro. Theodoro is another Canadian who's probably going to have the hometown on his side here. But again, he's a total ground fighter. So it's not that exciting hometown Canadian fighter, mixing it up, throwing down. Theodoro really does favor the ground game. And I feel like Eric Anders has had some really difficult scheduling spots in some of these fights, getting fights canceled, late notice fights. Excuse me, the fight against Thiago Santos was a late notice fight, the way that they put it together. A very fun, competitive fight. And then, of course, Anders got knocked out late in that fight. But I think this is a better situation here. He's been able to train and prepare for his opponent. And the great thing about Anders in this fight is the former Alabama football player. Is he short, stocky, and really strong? So it's hard to get in on a takedown on him. He already has that low center of base. Another fight that's relatively close to a pick'em. I think you might have to lay 120 with Anders, but I went with the better athlete in a good spot with a little bit better scheduling situation in Eric Anders.
All right, Matty. So, we'll break down all of Matty's best bets. And do want to give George Young, a fan of the show, he brings up Jimmy lost his last 2 fights, talking about Jimmy Manua here. Close to 40 years old, Santos on a roll. Does that scare you that, almost 40 years old and you're still picking him to win it here, Matty?
Sure. I mean, look, at some point you could say that, look, this guy might be starting to get over the hill, but Thiago Santos is 34. So let's not act like he's 25 or 26 here. He's also 34 years old, and we just saw it a few weeks ago. Jacare Souza, 39 years old, against Chris Weidman. Jacare wins by knockout in the underdog situation. For whatever reason, and I'm not 100% sure what it is, First of all, in athletics, period, we see it with Tom Brady, Jacare Souza, Anderson Silva. I can name a lot of UFC fighters that are right around 40 years old, and not just in MMA, but in all sports, competing at a higher level than 37 to 41-year-olds ever have in the history of sports before. So I'm not as concerned there. And on the other side, again, we're not talking about 22 and 38. We're talking about 34 and 38. There's 4 years age different here. And what happens to Thiago Santos when he doesn't get the knockout all the time? He gets knocked the bleep out. And in this fight, we got a bigger, stronger, striking-orientated guy. I think that's what's going to happen.
All right, Matty, great defense there. And let's go ahead and for the strictly bettors out there, if you could just go down and kind of recap all of your bets on the UFC 231 card.
So the main event, look, it's a little bit assumptive here, and maybe even a little bit emotional too for me, as I'm such a huge fan of Max Holloway. So I have to assume he's 100% healthy here, and maybe he's not, but I can't make the assumption in making a wager that he's not 100%. So I bet Max Holloway at plus 105, and I also played the over 3.5 rounds because I think both of these guys are actually really good at getting out of submissions, and Brian Ortega isn't a one-punch striker. I think both of them have pretty good chins. They're only 27 years old. I think this one has a good chance at actually being a back-and-forth brawl that goes to decision. Played over 3.5 rounds, and I played Max Holloway. In the co-main event, I played a half unit on Joanna Jędrzejczyk, plus 280, as I think she might be able to out-volume strike Valentina Shevchenko in a fight that's expected to go the distance. I played Cowboy Oliveira, minus 120 against Gunnar Nelson. I don't even know that fight's competitive. I thought Alex Oliveira should have been a significantly higher favorite. Took a shot with the better submission artist Gilbert Burns at around even money in a fight that we know is going to go to the ground against Olivier Mercier. And I took Eric Anders in the same situation, minus 110, minus 120 against Elias Theodoro. And again, a much better scheduling spot for Eric Anders this time. Look, Eric Anders, if he didn't lose that fight to Thiago Santos, would have been minus 300 and still undefeated coming into this fight. It's amazing how one single loss in a bad scheduling spot can change the entire perception of a fighter. Better scheduling spot, better matchup for Eric Anders here.
Thanks for breaking that down, Matt. And yeah, as far as my best bets, I always go back, watch the show, and pretty much put a unit on everything that Matt's betting. And I'm going 2 units on Alex Oliveira. I think you can get him even money right now using SBR odds. And also, I'm going to throw a little extra 2-unit bet on Gilbert Burns, like you said, the jiu-jitsu practitioner, at about even money on the prelims. So those are going to be my 2 heavy bets. Also riding with you, Matt. So it should be an exciting one. Toronto, Canada, tomorrow night. Where are you planning on watching it?
I'm going to go to Green Valley Ranch. It's the closest big casino to me. It's one of the nicest local casinos in Henderson. That's the suburb I live in Vegas. So I'll probably head over there. They usually have cool viewing parties. $20 gets you in and includes a few drinks, and and it's close to home. So I'll probably be headed over there.
All right, Matty. Well, thanks for your time. Best of luck with your bets. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you for the next numbered UFC event. Best of luck with your bets, guys.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Matt.
See you, Drew. Have a good one, man.